Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, and when I'm not trying my best to shut out the bad voices, I'm here at the Wolfula reviewing movies. No, shut up. You're not real. You're just in my head. I can't do that to orphans! Anyway, it's been about a minute since my last review, which isn't cool, I guess, so, as decided by my loyal patrons on Patreon, thank you, I'll be reviewing a classic film by the late great Wes Craven, and another not-so-classic Wes Craven film. The Hills Have Eyes, the original 1977 film, and the 1984 sequel. Both of these films were written and directed by Craven before the Nightmare on Elm Street series brought him more mainstream recognition and acclaim. In the years leading up to Freddy, Craven directed porno flicks under pseudonyms and worked on cheap exploitation flicks with Sean S. Cunningham, who later directed Friday the 13th himself. Craven eventually dipped his feet into the exploitation and porn-adjacent genre of horror with 1972's The Last House on the Left, which was Craven's first feature that didn't have a fluffer. Last House on the Left was very much a horror flick involving vulnerable young women relentlessly and viciously attacked by killers, but still sported the trappings of exploitation films with the rape and revenge formula popular during the 70s. Last House on the Left's success was a mixed blessing due to its controversy, but it led to Wes Craven making another film in the exploitation horror mold 5 years later, The Hills Have Eyes, which still has the exploitation aspects, but is heavier on the sweet, sweet horror, and not so much just seeing gratuitous shit happen, though this flick has its fair share of gratuitous shit, not gonna lie, gratuitous shit is what pays the bills, baby. The Hills Have Eyes was inspired by the Sawney Bean legend about a notorious Scottish family who totally existed sometime between the 13th and 16th centuries. Alexander Sawney Bean was a typical Scotsman. He lived in a cave, spawned an incestuous family of 14 children and 32 grandchildren, and had his clan ambush travelers, murder them, and cannibalistically eat their dismembered corpses. You know, just your fucking everyday Scottish family, eh? The irony in the Sawney Bean story comes from how civilization reacted to the family's crimes. The dudes got their limbs and dicks cut off and they bled out, while the women later burned after getting an eyeful of that fun stuff that happened to the guys. Wes Craven saw the commercial appeal of this gruesome tale of incestuous cannibals, but being a man with an intellectual background, also saw the potential for social commentary in how supposedly civilized people can respond to brutality with more brutality. The working title for The Hills Have Eyes was Blood Relations, The Sun War, which sounds like the title of an L. Ron Hubbard book. Blood Relations would have taken place in the near future of 1994 in the woods, but producer Peter Locke wanted a film that took place in the desert instead. The guy must have really liked sweating his balls off or something, eh? The desert cannibal thing does draw some pretty clear-cut comparisons to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which to me is a better film by a wide margin, but The Hills Have Eyes has enough going for it to keep it distinct from the Tobe Hooper classic. The film's story chiefly concerns the Carter family, who are on what should prove to be a National Lampoon's vacation-like trip from Ohio to California, filled to the brim with wacky hijinks. The Carter family, tugging along a fancy travel trailer, is composed of retired cop Bob, his wife Ethel, their teenage kids Brenda and Bobby, who can do flips, no need to show off Bobby, Jesus Christ, and their beloved dogs Beauty and the Beast. Aw, that's some really cute subtext right there. Along with the Carters are Bob and Ethel's eldest daughter Lynn, her mustachioed cutoffs-wearing husband Doug Wood, and their baby, let's just fucking call it baby. I mean, it has a name, but it's irrelevant. It's just a goddamn baby. Who cares? Okay, so the film deals not with the usual college-age teens primarily, but with family. And it really covers all the bases in its depiction of two typical family units within one flick. A family with grown teenage kids and a brand new family with a baby. The baby alone kinda adds some stakes you don't really see in a horror flick often. The most defenseless incarnation of a human possible. Yes, the most defenseless. More importantly, though, are the dogs. Like, when dogs die in a movie, it's always the saddest thing. The thing you least want to happen. Babies? Not so much. The Carter family is traveling through the Nevada desert near Nellis Air Force Base, the kind of desert popular with nuclear weapons tests.
Jesus Christ, in a crunch, what was that?
A desolate, damned emptiness in America. I mean, nothing could conceivably lurk around this place. It's fucking Nevada. bat country. Well, unbeknownst to the Carter family, but knownst to us, there's more out there in the desert than just Tobey Maguire in a shitty wig hitchhiking. On the way, the Carters aim to claim a silver mine nearby that they inherited.
You see, it's my Aunt Mildred's gift to Bob and me on our silver anniversary, and that's tomorrow.
Which is really how you can tell that they're middle class. Not even platinum? Ah, fucking animals. Something's going down in the desert, though, that has something to do with old Fred, the crusty gas station owner who talks exposition to himself.
Boy, they'd leave me belly up out here if they knew I was getting ready to run. Don't you make a noise when you walk.
Fred's planning to leave the desert at long last, and a local pharaoh-looking scavenger girl named Ruby desperately wants to join him.
Do you think you could pass out there with the regular folks? Why, you don't know a knife and fork from your 5 fingers. And you stink like a horse.
Well, she has better hygiene than Madonna, at least. What has these two spooked? Well, the Carters are gonna find out.
Look, mister, don't take your family back in there. The silver's been gone 40 years now. Besides, there's nothing back in there but animals.
I'm sure it's no big deal. I mean, if it was a big deal, Fred wouldn't be so vague about his warning. After filling up at Fred's Oasis and giving it a high Yelp rating, the Carters are off to meet their destiny, and not too long after, Fred's truck, his only means of transportation / escape, fucking explodes suddenly. Oh man. Good thing the Carters weren't around for that. It could have really negatively impacted Fred's Yelp rating.
There'll be hell to pay now.
Worst of all, though, the Carters nearly hit a rabbit and crashed into a, bush, I guess. Consequently, the Carters are stranded in the vast desert and are being watched by beings unknown. I'd like to make things clear, though. Despite the title, the hills do not literally have eyes. I was pretty disappointed when I first saw it, so here's a computer-generated image of hills with actual eyes. It's magnificent, isn't it? Thank me later. The true gravity of the situation that the Carters find themselves in is revealed when Big Bob splits up from his family to try to get help at Fred's gas station. Instead of relief, Bob finds Fred hurriedly trying to hang himself like an emo kid bullied on MySpace.
Should left you hanging if you took a shot at me. Not until you tell me what the hell is going on.
Fred, the exposition grandpa, explains that he sired a freakishly huge boy that split his wife wide open when he was born. Fun! The kid was a violent troublemaker that Fred eventually beat the shit out of after the boy killed his own sister.
I hit him with a tire iron and I split his face wide open.
How bad was it?
I thought I'd killed him.
The boy eventually grew up in the desert, fucked a prostitute, and brought up a brood of horrible kids. It's a bit like the Kardashians.
Long enough for a devil kid to grow up to be a devil man.
Anyway, Fred's descendants have been driven to cannibalism due to dwindling resources, and guess what? Bob's family back at the trailer are the latest target of this killer clan. Well, maybe the Tobias Funke-looking motherfucker can fend them off. Yeah, totally. Oh boy, they're fucking dead. I hate when that happens. In a lot of ways, The Hills Have Eyes is structurally similar to The Last House on the Left's story of rape and revenge, but on a far grander scale, especially for an exploitation flick. However, the film thrives a lot more on a sense of hopeless isolation for its chills than just the shock value typical of its genre. The Nevada desert is established as a vast, lifeless expanse during the day, and at night, it's totally pitch black. All the Carter family's attempts to contact help are either unheard or responded to with heavy breathing. But that's pretty standard for CB radio, admittedly. This film also sees Craven begin to stretch his legs as a writer, giving greater attention to the characters of his story than many of his contemporaries within the genre. The Carter family's dynamic is believable. The kids bitch and moan.
Be French fries, human French fries.
The adults are total hard asses.
All right, everybody, stop that debt.
There's a lot of friction between the characters.
And you watch your heart, too. You know what Dr. Springer said.
Well, Dr. Springer can take his stethoscope and shove it into his little black bag.
But a clear familial bond and love is there, which makes what happens in the flick all the more tragic. I mean, look at that group huddle. The power of family. The characters of this film aren't total cardboard cutouts. They have backstories and are even flawed. Like Big Bob, the retired cop, who might be, just a little bit, prejudiced.
Niggers shoot arrows at me and the hillbillies throw dogs off the roofs at me.
It's still horrible, though, when Bob gets crucified on a tree, exploded, and set on fire. Savage as fuck! You can tell that it's a devastating experience for Bob's family, even though Bob looks like the cartoon version of what a burn victim looks like. The acting in the flick is on point, though. The cast really sells the trauma of the situation that their characters find themselves in.
They got food, ammo, they killed Dad and Lynn, and they got the baby, and they're gonna be back.
Alright, let's talk about the situation, The antagonists of The Hills Have Eyes are the Jupiter clan, a family of incestuous cannibals like in the Sonny Bean story. Well, actually the Jupiter clan is only composed of 2 separate generations, so the kids in this family aren't really the products of incest. Instead, the deformities in the kids can be attributed to their prostitute mama's alcohol abuse. And I guess because they live in the desert near a nuclear test site. Jupiter is the brutal, scarred patriarch of the clan, and he has some equally barbaric sons.
I heard you messing with Grandpa Fred. I fixed Grandpa Fred good.
The rapey Mars, who sports a jerry curl, ooh, trendy, and treats parakeets like they're a crawdad.
Baby's fat. You fat. Fat and juicy.
And Mercury, the shitty joke-cracking simpleton who is, well, short-lived. Yeah, all the hill people are named after celestial bodies like fucking Sailor Moon characters. The hill folk honestly aren't all that memorable except for Pluto, played by Michael Berryman, the icon of the film. Berryman was born with hypohydrotic ectodermal dysplasia, which in English means he doesn't have hair, fingernails, sweat glands, or even teeth. In other words, Michael Berryman doesn't really need makeup and prosthetics. The guy is highly sought after by low-budget horror films for, and not to come off as insensitive, saving a lot of money on makeup effects. The guy looks like a cool monster just casually, but there's a sort of Boris Karloff as Frankenstein innocence about Pluto and other Michael Berryman characters that makes him scary and lovable. Of course, there's also Ruby, the most passably normal of the clan, the Lisa Simpson of this family, the female voice of reason. Ruby was a good choice on Craven's part because it adds conflict and dimension to what otherwise be a simple-minded killer family.
What's the matter? You don't like dog anymore?
I like it.
I don't blame Ruby for wanting to leave the desert when all there is to eat is dog or people, but those are still better options than that Taco Bell down the road. Speaking of eating dogs, well, yeah, one of the dogs does die early on in the flick, so I'll save you a trip to doesthedogdie.com, y'all. Beauty the dog's death is a revenge parable. When Beauty is killed, this brings out the beast, her mate, who goes to great lengths himself to wreak revenge. I didn't know that dogs understood concepts like revenge, but I also didn't know that dogs knew what walkie-talkies were. I'm learning new things from this flick. The point is that the pursuit of revenge brings out the animal in us and makes us do horrible things, which is highly relevant to the modern retelling of the Sonny Bean story. The Hills Have Eyes is clearly a more intellectual effort in exploitation films on Wes Craven's part, and is an early example of his attempts to elevate horror status beyond just blood and guts, but this is still a drive-in exploitation flick at the end of the day. There's shit thrown in here like a whole scene with a tarantula the crew found, implied rape of a teenage girl, mothers are shot. It's savage as fuck, literally. At the same time though, this movie has some really rinky-dink art design, especially on the Jupiter clan's part. It looks like they borrowed some Indian costumes from Bonanza, stapled some KFC bones to them, and called it a day. I don't know, maybe I was spoiled by the late Robert Burns' amazing art design for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. His work on The Hills Have Eyes isn't nearly as good. I guess maybe he shot his whole desert cannibal family wad on the Sawyers. I would have liked to see more of how these people live, but based on their Flintstones-like dwelling, I wouldn't be surprised seeing a woolly mammoth shower that says, "It's a living." Spoiler time! Gonna be giving away the ending of the original Hills Have Eyes. If you don't want this fucking brutal ending ruined for you, skip to this time code. Okay, so the Jupiter clan has their fun with the Carters, including murdering Doug's wife Lynn and semi-murdering Grandma Ethel, but they really wanted the baby. Why? For that sweet, sweet baby meat.
About time we got some powerful food around here. We're gonna eat it too.
I really do envy these boys. Baby meat is what the food at Arby's is made of. It's scrumptious. Well, Doug, Bobby, and even their dog the Beast plan to retaliate against the backwoods, back desert yokels and get that damn baby back and its precious meats with an even playing field during the day. Essentially, it's the exploitation formula also used in Last House on the Left, where the brutalized are forced to be just as brutal as their brutalizers. Absolutely brutal! But again, it ties in with the Sawney Bean mythos, which I guess you could say was an exploitation tall tale of its era. Anyway, Ethel, after you see her bleed out and die over an extended period of time, which was really fun, is used as granny bait for Jupiter. Grannies are the perfect bait. Their meat is aged to perfection. Jupiter ends up falling for it hook, line, and sinker. You know, the ending of this movie is a bit like Home Alone, but with cannibals. Brenda and Bobby rig their family's trailer to explode, and the two celebrate amid the smell of their burning mother. It's a touching moment that's interrupted when it turns out Jupiter survived the explosion and is pissed. Yup, explosions in this movie work just like they do in the cartoons. Brenda manages to ask Jupiter a question, and Bobby smokes the fool. Yeah, an explosion can't kill this fucker, but bullets can. Sure, I buy that. Oh yeah, the Beast brutally mauls Pluto to death, but based on the reactions, you'd think he was getting a blowjay. It's a symbolic death. Or something. Meanwhile, Ruby steals back Doug's baby and brings it to the father, but first, Doug has to kick Mars's ass while wearing beige pants. Ruby prevents Doug from predictably getting his ass kicked by putting a rattler on Mars, but Doug, like always, takes things too far by viciously stabbing Mars to death. Way to go, Doug. Great job. They were just messing around. The film ends abruptly on a dour note of just death as Ruby grieves for her brother Mars. It shows Doug in a moment of remorse as he realizes that he may be no better than the savages that attacked his family to begin with. Also, the color red is cool. Come to think of it, I wonder if they still went to the silver mine after all this. All those murders shouldn't stop them from having a good time. So, that was the original Hills Have Eyes. It's a pretty deep exploitation flick with subtext, and it's a great modern retelling of the Sawney Bean story without being a regurgitation. It's rough around the edges and visually hasn't aged all that well compared to some of its contemporaries, but considering it's Craven's second feature in a long, accomplished career, it's a very important, iconic horror film that furthered the genre and is still worth watching today. I give The Hills Have Eyes grandma bait out of baby meat. Next vid, I'll be covering Craven's not-so-classic sequel to this flick. Stand on your heads and stay tuned, kiddos. I would like to thank the following folks for donating to my Patreon. The channel would be nowhere without loyal viewers like you, and your continued support is greatly appreciated. If any of you would also like to donate to the channel, follow the link to my Patreon at the end of the vid or the description. Thanks again from your old pal, Dr. Wolfula.
Will be French fries, human French fries.